Wishart, and welcome to DAAC 1311, your first lecture. You should have already watched this first that talks about what we're going to be doing and, the schedule and grades and all that good stuff. And if you haven't, go back and watch this first and then come back and watch this second, right? We're going to be talking about Chapter 1 in the book, Theory and Practice of Counseling and Psychotherapy by Gerald Corey today, and that's the introduction to the course. In your course room, you found other things like the student's handbook and PowerPoints of this lecture and what have you. You can utilize those too, but I'll be doing one of these lectures pretty much for every chapter that we look at in the book. And this is a true lecture. I'm doing the talking, you're doing the listening, or, you're supposed to be listening anyway. It's not interactive like I'd like it to be. If circumstances allowed, for me to choose everything that I like to do, I would prefer being in a classroom with you so that we can look eye to eye and walk around and talk to each other and take a break and that kind of thing. But it's the year of our Lord 2021, and there's a pandemic on, so we're not doing that. So I'll make the videos, I'll post them for you. You can watch them. There's a quiz associated with them. You can get back with me on messages. You can do discussions with your classmates on the discussion boards if you like. So there's all kinds of alternatives to face-to-face interactions. And avail yourself of them. And if you have questions for me, send me an email or give me a call, something like that. Do it in the course messages. And that's how we'll get through the semester. I am delighted that you're here. As far as I'm concerned, everybody in class has an A. I'll be delighted if we get to the end of the semester and everyone still has an A. I don't worry about grade inflation. If you do the work, you get the A. With that said, we'll get started on that work, and I'll share my screen with you, and we'll go through Chapter 1. It shouldn't take us a long time. Short chapter. And ta-da, here it is. DAAC 1311, Theory and Practice of Counseling and Psychotherapy, Chapter 1, and the title of the chapter is Introduction and Overview, which is good because that's what it is. It's an introduction and an overview. And probably where we should start is, what is counseling and psychotherapy? The world got along without counselors forever, and counseling came out of two related disciplines, actually. One of them is religion, so that forever and a day, if you had problems or you wanted to discuss the meaning of life or what have you, you didn't go to your counselor, you went to your priest or to your shaman or to your rabbi or to your pastor or to, whomever. And they taught you and advised you from the tenets of the faith, how people define themselves in relation to the cosmos and to God and their higher powers and what have you. Or you talk to your teachers, to your philosophers, to the people who were the wise people of the culture, and they taught you based on sometimes on a philosophy, a way of looking at the world that was heavily infused with religion, and these two disciplines became married. Counseling and psychotherapy grew out of the marriage of religion and philosophy, and is still heavily infused in many ways with religious and cultural beliefs and philosophy as well. Counseling as a practice is listening to people and giving them feedback. That's basically what counseling is. Counseling can be formal and it can be informal. Carl Rogers, one of the theorists that we'll be looking at in this course, once noted that some of the best counseling ever takes place in kitchens between two people who care about each other over coffee, and is transformational and growth oriented in nature. Sometimes, again, it's religious in nature, and we have approaches to counseling that are based on a belief in God and a reliance on higher powers, etc. Counseling is necessarily based in one way of thinking or another, one philosophy or another, or a combination of belief systems. Religion is fascinating to me. Mexican Catholicism is fascinating to me. The Spaniards brought their beliefs from the old world to the new to convert the people who lived here. The Incans and the Mayans who still worship Quetzalcoatl and Huitzilopochtli and had all their old gods. But the Spaniards brought them saints. The old religion didn't go away, it just rolled over into the saints. So sometimes we combine belief systems and we're not even aware of it. And one of the things that we need to do in counseling is become aware of it. Counseling is a manifestation of the interactions and personness of the individuals engaged in it. That means that I am who I am and you who are you are. But when we come together and become a us in any type of relationship, it changes me, it changes you. The dynamic of us changes me, changes you. Makes sense? Okay, yeah, we'll talk about that some more. Maybe it will make sense. What is psyche? This is psyche. See the little butterfly wings on her back? Psyche is a Greek word. It means soul. And this young lady, the representation, this painting is called The Hesitation of Psyche by Guillaume Signac. I like his work, so you got a couple of them in here. But she is, this is called The Hesitation of Psyche. She's got to make a decision and she's got to take an action, and she's hesitating because human beings hesitate. Our decisions sometimes are such that we second guess ourselves and what have you. Psyche was born a human woman, and she became a goddess later. But she was born a woman, and with all the human frailties, but she was born with great beauty. And because she had great beauty, and because she was admired by men, she was detested by Aphrodite, the goddess of love, who was jealous of Psyche's beauty. And Aphrodite sent her son Eros down here to kill her, down to earth to kill Psyche. But Eros fell in love with her, and Eros and Psyche were a great love story. When we get into the chapter on psychoanalysis, we'll hear a lot more about Eros and Psyche. But Psyche had something in her that made her more than she was, and we're familiar with this. We call it the soul. And she grew through her struggles, and she grew through her affections, and she grew through her relationships. And Eros, who is the son of the goddess of love, and who is a love god of his own, grew to love Psyche more through her human frailties, and he saw past her abundant beauty to see that there was more to her than met the eye. And through her frailties, his affection for her grew. She did become the goddess of the soul. Beauty is powerful, but it's fleeting, and that's the gospel. you know? And there's a beauty that you can't see, a beauty that's deeper than the outside. And even though that outside is the thing that we see first, there's more to it than that. And Eros, the son of Aphrodite, saw the beauty of Psyche, and he loved her for it. And his love deepened when he saw the beauty that was inside her, the soul beauty, if you will, in all her human frailty. And he forgave her for a betrayal. She broke his confidence with her sisters. And even though he was terribly hurt by it, it actually strengthened their relationship. So it's all interesting and everything, but what's that have to do with psychotherapy or counseling? I heard that. You were saying that to someone out there. Psyche means soul. Therapy means healing. Psychotherapy literally means healing of the soul. Yeah, right. I thought it was all about the mind too, didn't you? And certainly the issues that people bring to us are more than a linear cause and effect thing about thinking, behaviors, etc. We'll talk about that in each and every chapter that we visit this semester, I suppose. And speaking of that, there are so many theories, though. Which one's the right one? You know, which is right? Well, you know, and the answer is all of them. But it depends on the individual client. It depends on the type of problem they're having. It depends on the style that the counselor brings to the counseling relationship. It depends on the philosophical orientation of each of the people involved. The personhood of the counselor and the quality of the relationship inform the positive outcome of counseling. It's the best predictor of a positive counseling outcome is the quality of the relationship between the people involved in it. If two people are trusting and honest with one another, and they can level and not be judgmental, etc., and so forth, that's a transformational relationship. A skill that we have to have, and I'll hammer on this a little bit through here, is listening. The ability to turn off the tapes in our heads where we're rehearsing what we're going to say when that person stops talking, and actually pay attention to what the other person is saying to us, to listen to that, and not judge them for it, not tell them how screwed up they are for thinking that way, etc., but to listen and try to see where they're coming from. Not try to fix them, not try to judge them. If you got someone in your life that you can do that with, you are way ahead in the game, because a lot of folks don't. And so this happens in psychotherapy as a process of engagement between two people, both of whom are bound to change through the therapeutic relationship. We'll talk more about listening and disclosures in a bit. The idea that I think a lot of people come into this with the idea, I tell you what, I'll do a little self-disclosure. I came out of the 12-step programs, and I thought, maybe I'd make a good counselor. I mean, I sponsored people and stuff. And so I did some volunteering with Palmer Drug Abuse Program, stuff like that. I found out I did like it, and I was pretty good at it. But when I decided I was going to do it for a living, I had the idea that being a counselor was kind of like being a glorified sponsor, and that I'd be laying wisdom on people. Suffer unto me, little drug addict, you know. Uh, and I would tell you wonderful things like don't drink, read the big book, go to meetings, call your sponsor, which I did give a lot of that advice, by the way, and still do. But what a substance abuse counselor does, what an addictions professional does, is way different than just being a sponsor. And it should be, because, I make my living doing that kind of thing. And I should be giving them something more than they could get for free down at their local 12-step club. Would you agree? Anyway, so this, my idea of what a counselor is changed. And the idea that I should spend most of my time listening to clients and trying to understand them was, something I had to get my head around. Anyway, we'll talk about that more down the road. It's a quote from Carney Mary. I heard her speaking at New Hope Women's Center back in the early 80s. I think it was 84. That's my best guess. I tell my girls to walk it. They may be the only big book the next girl ever reads. And this was Carney Mary. And she was a Carney, and she was a con. And she said anytime a guy ever opened his wallet around me, it was to give me permission to take what was in it. So she had a pretty checkered career, and I met her towards the end of her life. She had emphysema, riding around in a wheelchair with an oxygen bottle on her back and still sucking down Viceroy cigarettes. The kind of person the therapist is remains the most critical factor affecting the client and promoting change. Carney Mary was she wasn't a licensed professional, but she was my idea of a stereotypical 12-step counselor type of the era. She was tough. She'd get in your face. She'd do confrontations, all that kind of good stuff. She also said at the same presentation, we didn't have a TV and we didn't have radios in the house because, if that's what you want to do, go home. Go back to your own house. Don't waste my time. We didn't have magazines and newspapers because if you want to do that, go to the library and leave the bed here for someone who wants to get well. The only thing you read in her recovery center was AA literature and the Holy Bible. That was it. I don't know what she'd have said if someone had whipped out a Koran or, a Talmud. Anyway, so she was quintessentially the tough, confrontational 12-step counselor who didn't mince words and who was not afraid to challenge you on, your stories, things that you're trying to pull. If there was any stereotype that I would like to drive a stake through, cut the head off of, and burn in the fire like Dracula, it would be this tough, confrontive, badass, 12-step oriented kind of counselor. That's not an effective approach. We lose more people than we reach when we do that kind of stuff, and that's empirical. That's been studied and proven. Theories and techniques can and will be learned as we go along and are necessary to effective counseling. Confrontive counseling is one of the least effective methods. But if that's all you have in your toolbox, if all you have in your toolbox is a hammer, every problem you see looks like a nail. That makes sense? My cat's commenting on it back there. Gerald Corey holds, per the text, that who you are as a therapist or in our case, an LCDC, which is a licensed chemical dependency counselor, which I assume most of you are aspiring to, is critical to effective counseling. Students, as far as Corey's concerned, should also have a counseling experience to feel what it's like being a client. And some of us have. Some of us have been in counseling before we get here, so we know what it's like to be a client. And some of us will get that experience through the classes. We'll be in a situation where we can learn to experience what the client's going through, say, for instance, through role play or something along those lines, and feel the anxiety that clients will feel over self-disclosure, and learn how to model growth and courage. As I think I said, I don't know, that when we have a client in the office with us, that's a different type of relationship. And there is anxiety on the part of the client, and there's anxiety on the part of the counselor too. I can pretty much guarantee you that someday, sometime during your career, someone will come into your office and sit down across from you and tell you way more than you wanted to know. And that's something that you have to deal with on the fly. That's something that you have to accommodate as it's happening. But something you need to remember is that there's a trust involved here, and there is a decision involved here. And when our clients, when these people who are sitting there in our office decide to share this information with us, very, very often they're telling us something about themselves that no one knows. No one knows. Their mother doesn't know it. Their father doesn't know it. Their husband, their wife, their children, their best friends know none of this, and they tell it to us. And that is a momentous circumstance that's happening in the office then, and what we do with that's important. We learn to model courage and growth for our clients, and they model courage and growth to us too. Both of us grow through that experience. This transformation that occurs in this relationship is not a one-way street. It affects both the counselor and the client. We also need to know about theories and techniques, theories of personality and supervised experiences, which are essential to effective counseling. And this is from Corey's presentation for the text. One of the theorists that we're going to be looking at Carl Jung was talking to a group of students at the university in Vienna, and he told them to work hard, apply yourselves, learn your theories as best as you can, and always be prepared to push them to one side when you touch the miracle that's human life. And that's pretty sound advice. Very often, it's good to have theories and it's good to have ideas, but, we shouldn't let our preconceived ideas about what's supposed to happen in counseling get in the way of what is actually happening in counseling. I hope that'll make more sense about 7 weeks in. Okay. The theories we'll be looking at, the theories that you'll be seeing in your book, are psychoanalytical, psychodynamic approaches, and this grew out of the Freud, who is the cleanest example, I guess, of science and faith coming together. And we'll talk about how that occurred when we get to chapter 4. But there's a lot of language that came out of the psychoanalytical movement that informs what the rest of us are doing in our practices today. We'll also look at the humanistic theories that came from Adler and the existentialist and Rogers and etc., where more is made about the experiential reality, living life from moment to moment, subjective interpretations of what's important and what's going on, emphasis on relationship, etc. And just about the time we're feeling comfortable in that, we'll jump over into behaviorism, where behavior is all that matters, and how you would manipulate behaviors through rewards and punishments and things like that that are introduced into the environment to create behavioral changes in the organism. Cognitive behavior therapies, CBTs, that are very, very common with treatment programs. I heard that. One of you said, why are they common with treatment programs? Well, they're common with treatment programs because they work very well in treatment programs. That's why they've been adopted. And evidence-based outcomes indicate that cognitive behavior therapies are good with establishing and maintaining sobriety among a substance use disordered population. We'll talk about them too. Systems, family systems theory, Bowenian theories, these types of things. Systems are based on the notion, and it's a very true notion, that a system such as a family or a club or a nation is greater than the sum of its parts. That you can look at these individuals, but looking at the individual, it cannot tell you, why or how big or how powerful the system itself is. And if you look at the system and how it functions, then the behavior that you see of the individuals in the systems begin to make sense. And that is a very, very short Reader's Digest condensed encapsulation or tagline of what we'll be looking at when we get there. And then there's postmodern approaches, because the evolution continues. Brief interventions, narrative therapy, solution-based counseling, etc. So we've got a lot to talk about this semester, and and hopefully a lot for you to learn that will be helpful to you. At the end of each chapter, there's a male client, Stan, and a female client, Gwen. Now, Stan's been around since the very first time that I opened Corey's text many years ago. It's been through this is the 16th edition, I think it is, of the Corey text. So it's been around a while. And Stan's been around a while, and he's the typical client that at the end of the chapter, there's a brief discussion of how this type of counseling theory would be applied to this type of client. But Stan's a male, and one of the things that's true about counseling theories, one of the things that's true about research, psychological research in general, is that men are studied more frequently than women. And that's definitely true in the substance use field. We have a lot more information about men than we do about women, and that's because we haven't studied women as much as we should. So Stan and Gwen, Gwen's a relatively new addition. How would this be applied to a woman and the types of issues that a woman's having? And this is really weird, because all the way back to Freud, most of the clients that are seen in counseling and counseling efforts and in substance abuse counseling too are female. This is a field that is largely female dominated. So that's kind of weird, huh? But it's clear that the focus shifts from approach to approach, as do the counseling techniques employed. So in conclusion, once again, substance abuse counseling is a narrow field with a narrow focus. but it meets a critical need in American society, and it's a growing field, and it's a dynamic field. And by that, once you get into this, you're never going to stop learning because, you know, because we're learning more every day. I do not teach these courses the same way I taught them 30 years ago because I've got way more information than I had 30 years ago. So it's a different type of approach. The counseling relationship is the most predictive of a positive outcome. You'll hear me reinforce that over time, and this is maybe the first time you're hearing it. According to Corey, it's important for a counselor to experience the anxiety and discomfort of being a client and of self-disclosure, and we have some classes where you're going to do that. You'll feel some of this in the group class. You'll feel some of this in the basic counseling skills class. You'll feel some of this in the family class that you'll have with Dr. Kaufman. These are... Trust me, you'll feel anxiety in a few places. One does not have to be recovering to be an effective counselor. That's another myth. Gotta drive a stake through it. There are plenty of people who are very effective and very good counselors and work very well with substance abusers because they've made it a point to understand the people they're working with. I'm a recovering person. I sobered up in April. I picked up my last Desire chip on April 20th, 1982. I didn't know it was going to be my last one because none of the others had worked, but it was. And I am a recovering person. I came to my recovery through the 12-step programs and self-help. I've never been formally diagnosed as a drug addict. Woohoo! Is that a little bit of denial there? I don't know. But I fit the diagnostic criteria. We'll talk about that in some other courses too. And there's a big if, I had to use my own experience and only my own experience with the people I worked with, my ability to be helpful would be greatly limited, because my experience is not necessarily your experience and vice versa. Much more than trying to convince you that my experience will work for you, I'd be much better served to try to figure out what your experience was and to help you make heads or tails out of that. And you are the expert on your own life. You do not have to have a brain tumor to be a neurosurgeon. You do not have to have fought in the Civil War to teach a class in it, and you don't have to be recovering to be an effective counselor. The recovering aspect can add a dimension that a non-recovering person doesn't have. I have the experience of being sick, of having blackouts and things like that. And I understand Jones in a way that non-recovering people have difficulty with. So it can be a plus, but it's not necessary. And it can be a minus, because if I am convinced that because it happened for me this way, it has to have happened to you that way, I'm not going to be helpful. And if I can only be helpful to people who have had my own experience, it would only apply to a bunch of little Howards out there, and that would be a slim population out of the substance using population, or the substance use disordered population. I do not argue for my uniqueness in that. I am a common garden type variety substance use disordered individual. I'm just saying that my specific reality is not something that everyone shares. And finally, self-care and self-awareness are very important to effective counseling. I have to learn about me, and I do learn about me in my interactions with other people, my relationships with other people. But it's important to monitor oneself and to do the things that, that keep me healthy and help me to avoid burnout and things like that. So there's a lot of self-examination that has to take place. I have to look at, what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, what I hope to get out of it, etc. And that, dear hearts, is that for chapter 1 in your book. And ta-da, here I am. And that's where we start. So I hope you got something out of the lecture. If you have questions or comments, you can always email them to me, or message me some way or another. I think you can. You can. You can even leave comments on the YouTube page that I'm posting this on. So, alrighty then. I will talk to you in chapter 2. Bye.